Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of SBJ Live. I'm Dan Kaufman with Sports Business Journal. Thank you for being here. This is how technology is unlocking efficiencies at scale and empowering the future of connected commerce. It is presented by Oracle, and in just a moment, I will introduce our panelists here, and we will get going. But before I do that, I want to welcome all of you to this episode of SBJ Live. I really appreciate you joining us here. I am here in Washington, D.C. on a beautiful, clean, crisp fall day, and I hope everything is well wherever you're joining us from. We have people coming from all over the world to join these episodes of SBJ Live, so thank you for being here. If this is your first episode of SBJ Live, I have a couple of ground rules I want to go over. If it's not your first episode, I apologize. You'll have to hear me say this again, but here are the ground rules. One, we want to make sure that you are introducing yourselves and telling us who you are and where you're coming from. And the way to do that is to message in the chat bubble on the right-hand side. Just say hello, tell us who you are and where you're coming from. And if you see people who you know messaging in the chat, feel free to message them as well. We encourage that type of interaction. And two, there's a questions bubble directly to the left of the chat bubble. That's where we want your questions. I've got plenty of questions for our panelists today, but we want your questions as well. There's no specific Q&A period for SBJ Lives. We want to weave your questions in throughout. So don't wait till the end. Drop a question in the question bubble. And if you see questions in there that you want to make sure that we get to, go ahead and upvote the questions that you want us to get to. You can do that in the chat bubble there, or excuse me, in the questions bubble. I see people introducing themselves in the chat. Hello, thank you for being here. Again, this is how technology is unlocking efficiencies at scale and empowering the future of connected commerce. I've got Simon Walker from Oracle and Scott Beatty from Untitled Clubs, and I'm going to give each of them a moment to introduce themselves, and I will start with Scott.
Good morning, all. Thanks for joining. My name is Scott Beatty. I want to put in a plug. I'm a Purdue Boilermaker graduate, so I have to throw that out there as we head to basketball season. Not great for football. I work for Untitled Clubs, which is the largest private holder of golf and country clubs in the United States. Couple things about that. We have about 400,000 members. We have golf, tennis, fitness, pickleball, and also restaurant dining. We also have what we call city clubs. We have about 20 of those, which are food and beverage membership things that you can join and become a member, and it's more of a social club. So I've been with Invited for about 4 years now, and as you can see, I'm a VP of IT there. So thanks for joining, all.
Thank you, Scott. Simon.
Hey, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having me, Dan. So I'm Simon. I'm an EVP at Oracle in our industry solutions world, and so I own our embedded finance and payments businesses. Oracle's a fairly large organization who's on a fairly simple mission, right, which is to help people to discover insights, see data in new ways, and really unlock the possibilities that brings. And so we do a lot of work in the stadium and sports world. All the way from kind of serving consumers at the point of sale to managing the business in the back, and then driving it from an infrastructure perspective. So again, thanks for having me, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Simon. All right, we're going to cover a number of different technologies throughout this probably 35 to 40-minute episode. I want to start with payment technologies, and I think let's talk about this both from a guest perspective and from a member perspective. Obviously, the member perspective is relatively unique to you, Scott, given what you do, and there might be some nuances between what a guest might expect and what a member might expect. But let's start just by talking about how payment technology is enhancing both the guest and member experience. And we can go, on the membership side, we can talk about business clubs or golf and country clubs, and then on the guest side, it might be relevant there as well, but also we can broaden it to college sports arenas, for example. So let me flip it to Scott first. Scott, address that. How is payment technology enhancing the fan experience, maybe a member-specific experience?
Yeah, so there's a couple nuances here I want to get out there. First of all, the majority of our members use member charge. So through our Oracle Micros Symphony product, we have about 1,600 terminals spread across our entire enterprise. Member charge is one of our biggest components. We talk about frictionless, right? We want people to come in and just say, here's my member number, and then they can charge through Micros, and then we're good to go. We do accept, and we just upgraded our entire enterprise to Oracle Payments, which really helped us to kind of move to the next level of payment technology. It allowed us to pick up the like contactless, so holding your card over to make a payment, and also Apple Pay, which was kind of a big pickup for us. So we can use your watch or a traditional Apple Pay on your phone to make payments. Typically, we get credit cards from guests of members. We get those or from private events. So if you bring guests out on the country club, on the golf course, they tend to pick up drinks or food or whatever they want to. So we use credit cards and we take those with some handheld devices. And then for the rest of the club, restaurant, private events, or even golf outings, that's when we drive most of our credit card technology through that. So just this year, we upgraded every single one of our clubs, 1,600 terminals at all, to be on the new Oracle Payments platform. And that has just really driven a lot of, I will say, a lot of growth. But a little caveat there is, if you think about country clubs, when you get out of college, the first thing you do when you get a job is that you join a country club. We typically see our membership base really kind of get past 30s into the 40s where people are established. So what you'll see is we have kind of an older generation right now. We have 65% of all of our tee times are booked through a mobile device. The other 35% are using a traditional website. So what does that tell you? Those people using the website are the older folks that just are not comfortable using a mobile device at this moment. So we see that kind of age plays into this quite a bit. The Apple Pay is certainly something that's been picked up by some of our younger members. Even myself, I hate to say this, but the first time I used my phone to pay was this last weekend at a tournament. So even myself, I'm not really cutting edge of all the technology, but that really drove a lot of the I say the success of just getting to the next thing. Members hated always have to hand a credit card over and they swipe and they give it back. Now they can just insert their own, tap it, or use their Apple Pay. So that was one of the biggest, I would say, innovations that we've made going to Oracle Payments and using that technology. The other piece really is handhelds. So point of sale terminals, you would see we have 1,600 of them. I call this out to say we have about 160 clubs, either golf and country or the city and stadium. Of those, we have about 10 handhelds at each club. And so typically those are really good for us for private events, for pool, if you're walking around the pool to take orders and send it directly to the kitchen. The piece where it's really helped is the beverage cart. So if anybody's been out on a golf course and the beverage carts come by and you get a hot dog, bag of chips or whatever, it's really helped us to be able to take that information to be able to actually charge it to a membership or to take a credit card real time out there when we don't really have connectivity to the Wi-Fi or anything. Those are kind of the biggest things that we've really made an adjustment with lately, with the technology. And we're always exploring new things as well, but those were the pieces that I would say are most relevant. For the stadium clubs, the thing that's unique there is just volume. You get 100,000 fans show up for a football game. You can't really use wireless or cellular because the signal's saturated. We've been working with some new things like using the Starlink, the Musk product, to really try to get a dedicated signal down to some tents or areas where we're trying to support the games for our members. And so those are some of the things I think I'd highlight there, Dan.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to flip it to Simon in just a minute. And Simon, I'll add a little nuance to the question. But I did want to thank the audience for introducing themselves in the chat and remind the audience to submit your questions in the questions bubble, which is right next to the chat. Don't wait till the end. We'll get to the questions as they come in. Simon, maybe I'll add a question on top of what Scott was talking about, but feel free to add to what he said. But if you can talk us through maybe some of the complexities involved in customizing, whether it's it's a stadium versus a member club, customizing the tech, and also a balance between you want some consistency across the board, but you also have to customize for the two different locales.
Yeah. It's a very difficult business you're all in, right? Stadiums, we get a couple of hours to sort of make the business work. It has to be very, very specific to the event. We see more and more facilities trying to have more and more events, right? Like not just the big sort of game stuff, but many, many smaller events to really fill the days. And so ultimately, you've got to have a model that, we're striving for the kind of, frankly, the financial interaction with a customer to be like totally minimized, right? Like very simple, very quick, not the kind of core part of the interaction, right? We want speed of service. We want simplicity for the end customer. And at the same time, right, like you've got actually quite a complex operating environment where we're changing menus, we're changing events quite broadly. So we'll have some stadium operators who we do payments with who, one night's a concert, the next is a game, the next might be some special dinner they're hosting for like a corporate sponsor. And so ultimately it's customization for that space, but then really the ability to think about like day in, day out through different kinds of events that are like, one might look like a quick service kiosk, the other might look like almost a fine dining experience. How do we enable you to kind of have really safe, secure payments, to treat guests the way they want to be treated, and do it without like a ton of work in the back office. It's one of the really unique things about Scott's world where they operate these very different environments, right? And I think, ultimately, I suspect if we all asked ourselves, everyone would love to have the private club experience in everything you do, right? Like I am known, the payment is just about a recognition of kind of who I am, and then sending it down to my account. And the question is like in a stadium environment where you've got a 2-minute interaction, let's say, because you're going to go grab a snack at a break. How do I enable someone to kind of make a selection, present a payment, not feel like it's really kind of the main thing they're doing, and to do that quickly. And so for us, from a tech perspective, that's really about kind of simplicity of configuration. So thinking about customization almost event to event, right? Like how do I enable a local manager to make those changes that are appropriate for themselves for that particular facility? So configuration event to event, and then maintaining all of the kind of core payment security and tooling in the background, so that you're not fundamentally kind of risking your compliance stance. You're not putting yourself into a bad position. It is where I think when you look at a lot of facilities, like you might have the world's greatest interaction with a consumer that's at your facility, and then all of a sudden, like you ask for a payment and like the record skips. It's different device. It's a different interaction. And so really we're trying to kind of integrate this into one interaction in front of the consumer, make it really, really quick, make it manageable sort of locally so they can make it appropriate for whatever thing they're running. And then ultimately in the background is where it's not all that sexy, right? But like we're going for absolute simplicity in terms of how we manage the business. So, you've got a payment stream that comes into your business office, right? It is part of the core operating system. It's not some other system. You're reconciling it all in some place. And so the sort of the name of the game, and I think, Scott's team has been really forward thinking about this, is like, how do I create the most integrated environment possible where the payment is part of that, where I can do things like, config from event type to event type very, very quickly, with my eye on like really good, clean execution for the consumer that's kind of simple and doesn't feel like, it's a sort of drawn out process.
I'm going to follow up with that, and Simon, maybe for you first and then Scott. It's enough, I feel like, to think about what the differences might be between what someone who's operating an arena versus operating a golf club might need right now. But then it's a whole other step to think about, well, what might they expect, or what might the fans or the guests or the members expect 4 or 5 years from now? Yeah. So how, when you're thinking about working with Scott and others, Simon, like how do you take into account the expectations that are going to change even within a year, and let alone 5 years?
Yeah, and certainly, when we do consumer studies, we do them really broadly. We do them across marketplaces. So, we're looking at like, hey, what's a retail experience that we think people are going to bring to the stadium? What's an experience maybe they're having at the airport with biometrics that ultimately they're going to find so convenient, they're going to be really looking for it in their stadium experience. And so I think, if you think about the big, broad trends that are in and around kind of payments, and some of these interactions, things like, digital ID, these kind of core wallets, and where we're embedding kind of finance or financial interactions into software tend to be where we see the most motion, right? So I think it's pretty likely that in a couple of years, and certainly it's something that we're working really broadly on across kind of the Oracle tech stack is, how do we embed really solid biometrics in this that aren't necessarily device-based, that are very, very portable, that I can come up to an order interaction and just by my voice and maybe picture like I'm authenticated, you've got my loyalty, we're taking the payment if you've kind of authorized me to do that. In the stadium environment, what we ultimately believe, right, is that you're going to have a much more bundled experience. So, you've purchased a ticket. A lot of operators have a lot of difficulty, let's say, embedding some other products in that. So like maybe your ticket comes with some experience, it comes with, a meal or whatever it might be. Getting out of this model where we've got a ticket that is separate from that is part of this. And so how do we kind of create, a package of things that you're allowed to consume as a consumer at a stadium? Let's say do it with biometrics, do it with a digital wallet, make it one transaction, one experience for the consumer. We see more and more pressure certainly to get there. And then for the sort of unknown consumer, right, to provide them really easy ways to on-ramp into a stadium experience that's totally seamless, likely has some biometrics, likely has some knowledge of them, even if they're not like a fan or they don't have the kind of loyalty app.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Simon. Scott, I'll flip it to you. Feel free to add whatever you'd like to the question of kind of like future proofing, right? Like, how do you think about what the expectations might be 5 years from now? But then I want to dive deeper into some of the stuff that Simon talked about, like biometrics, and maybe we'll bring in some artificial intelligence discussion as well. So, Scott.
Yeah, the piece I wanted to add first, the thing that's unique, not just the space we're in, but it's also we host major tournaments. We have an LPGA event we had at Seville this year. We have the Byron Nelson that we have at TPC Craig Ranch. We had the Invited Celebrity Classic in April. So we have a Halliburton. So we have a number of tournaments that just happen every year. You have to bring in new telephony, new internet pipes. You have to put kiosks out somewhere on the golf course. Well, how do you get power? That's one issue. And then technology from an internet. How do you get Wi-Fi or some connectivity? Talked about Starlink. That really changes a lot of our opportunities. But the thing that's worked well for us too is Micros allows us to run offline too. So we can stick a terminal anywhere on the golf course as long as it has power and we can transact. The downside of that is if I get a credit card, I can't quite get the authorization in offline mode. So the risk there is, could somebody come and give me a bogus credit card and take a transaction? Not a big risk for us, especially that most of our people that show up are guests of members. So that's not really a big risk. Mostly it's for tournaments or where you have outside people that are there for a wedding or an event where they're purchasing stuff. We see some of those challenges as well. The other piece that I want to touch on is we have, if you just say an average, 160 various clubs, city or country clubs. If you have 160 of those, we have 160 menus. We have 160 chefs. So we're not like a Waffle House or a typical restaurant where if you go into something like there, you might have 2 terminals, right? I told you most of our clubs have as small as 6, or my background here is Mission Hills. I think we have 40 at Mission Hills. They have 2 golf courses, but 40 terminals. But each of our clubs has a very unique menu, a very unique set of pricing, a very unique set of things. And even for, when we would do stadium support, you might have specific menu things that have to be updated just before game time. So, internet, cellular, all of those challenges present ourselves, and we've kind of made some headways. Starlink has been, a lifesaver. I just mentioned the PPA event. We're able to put some dedicated machines off of it so that we could actually run and sell merchandise events, things out in the field. But we're always looking at innovation as well. You talked about biometrics and AI. We'll come to that later. But, we toy around with how do you make the member experience better? So crazy idea that we threw out, like, hey, could we use drones to deliver food? So think about this. I'm on the 8th hole. I just say, hey, I'm here. I want a burger. I don't want a hot dog and a brat and a bag of chips. I want a legit burger and some French fries and stuff. Could we deliver it? Well, delivering by drone on a golf course is probably one of the worst ideas you could have, with balls flying all through the course. So, we always look at ways. And then you go, could we stick people in a golf cart and just say, hey, we'll drive out and meet you on the hole and hand you off some food, right? Sounds like a good upside, but then you're like, do you want a greasy burger while you're golfing and, on a golf cart and driving in the outdoors? So we look at ways, we're always looking at ways to innovate or try to make that member experience better. We use the word frictionless, not just frictionless from payment experience, but we want the member to have the least amount of friction or least amount of interaction as we can from they need to do something. We want them to come in, just say, half the time, I say not even half, the majority of our clubs, they know you. If you're a member, they know your name, they know your family, they know everything about you, your kids, where they go, they follow up. Hey, how was this? How was that? So it's a really interactive experience, but we don't want taking payments to be something that just is an extra thing, right? We're looking at could we, if you have your golf clubs at a country club, we see you have a 10 o'clock tee time. We go get your clubs in advance. We stick it on a cart. We know you like to have a 6-pack of Natty Light when you play golf. We load up the cooler in advance. We know that you typically want a sleeve of Pro V1s and, whatever else is, for a typical person. So can we, based on knowing a tee time coming, can we set that up and have that waiting for you? So when you show up, you walk right out, jump in your golf cart, and you're ready to go, right? We've also started looking at some other things like, can we check people in and take payments at the starting tee? So the traditional country club is you drive to the golf course, they grab your bag, you park, you walk in the clubhouse, you pay, maybe go to the driving range, maybe just go right out the number 1 tee. Well, can we get it to where you can just walk up, jump in the cart, and go to the first tee, right? Can we take a credit card out there on the first tee to check in? Member charge works today. We just say you're a member charge, it goes. But can we take a credit card at the first tee to really make that experience a little bit less, frictionless, if you will? So those are some of the things that we're engaged in and looking at. I would say, and some ideas are good, some are bad. When we get to biometrics, we'll talk a little bit about that. But like I said, we're more a laggard with some of the high-tech technology. Well, we like to, we're probably a couple years behind some of the latest and greatest. I just mentioned, earlier, either the, tap to pay, that's been out for quite a while, right? But we're just here this year getting to that. So a little bit of a laggard on a lot of that stuff, but we're always looking at ways to innovate with our membership to really just drive home that frictionless, but also engagement. We want people at our clubs, right? We want them to participate. And a lot of that I want to touch on too, maybe a little bit later when we get into more of the innovation and the next things, is just knowing when people are on property, right? And what can you do? Hey, I found a golf club and you didn't even know you lost it, but I know it's yours. I see you come to the club. I can send an alert and say, hey, Mr. Smith's in the club. Let's go get that golf club to him, or go put it in his bag or something like that. So we're always looking at ways to just, improve, innovate, and just, create that frictionless experience. One last thing out there, 8 years ago, I went to Great Wolf Lodge, right? Checked in, they gave me a little armband, right? From that point on, I didn't have to carry a credit card. I didn't have to, it's waterproof. I can buy anything. My kids can buy anything. I can check, or I can open my door to my room. That was 8-10 years ago, right? So that's the true spirit of how do we get to that kind of a model where you can just eliminate all the just extra stuff you have to go to, right? Can I get stuff in your cart for you so you don't have to walk into the clubhouse to pay, right? So,
yeah, it's a great example. It's been a while since I've been to Great Wolf Lodge with my kids, but when I did go, I'm pretty sure they had that tech in place, and it's been a while. You teased it, Scott, but let's go back to it. Biometrics, are you using it at your clubs? If so, how, and what has the response been?
We are not. And I would say it's a little bit scary, right? To quote a movie like Minority Report, when Tom Cruise is walking and it's doing ads for him and all that stuff, biometrics, facial recognition, that stuff. There's some legal stuff associated with it too that I think is still a little early. So I think is related to that will probably be a little bit of a laggard. Let the smart companies of the world figure out all the ways to interact with that, and then we'll come along maybe later. The second piece that you put along with biometrics, really AI. Obviously, if you're not doing something with AI at this point, you're probably way behind. We're really just trying to figure out, maybe do what the traditional ones are. If you, like we just did it for private events, a demo, a proof of concept. So what it would be like, hey, I need to have a wedding in Dallas on November 1st for 600 people. And then the AI response would be, great, here are the clubs with availability that will support that type of thing. And then it can interact, what kind of food you're looking for, what kind of menu, what kind of things, and it'll gather all this information. And then the last step is, great, a rep will be in touch with you. So then rather than spend all that time on the phone with somebody, the rep calls you and basically says, and this is future, right? This isn't today. The proof of concept we have demoed does all this, but the way it'll work is then the individual will call for the private event, the wedding or the just a party or whatever it is, Christmas celebration, holiday celebration. But they'll call and say, hey, I have you for this club. You're interested in this. Here's the menu. Here's all the stuff. Are you good to go? And they'll say, yeah, this is perfect. And then you send the form over to get signature and we're good to go. So so that AI is really for private events, maybe for call center to maybe get to, our call center, we have the ability for members to play at other affiliate clubs that are not necessarily a club within Club Corp's family, but they have a relationship. I live here in Denver. We have 3 country clubs, but just a couple blocks off the street is a club that I could go play. It's an affiliate club, but the way to get there is our agents actually have to call the club. Do you have availability? If you do, then great. They kind of be the go-between between a member and an affiliate club. We're really looking at AI there too, to see, is there a way that we could reduce that amount of time by saying, where do you want to play? When are you looking? What's your time range? How many people? That can go to an agent and they call you back with, here's what I have. Would you like me to book it? And then, we could do that. So again, things to minimize the interaction, things to really drive that. But AI is, that's where we see it right now. And then I hate to say it, but the service desk or a help desk, when you call for issues, whether it's a member issue or whether it's a technology issue, 18,000 employees, 160 clubs. I mean, we have a lot of people that have technology issues. So we're looking at that AI with the help desk to really, what problem are you having? Here's some options. Have you looked at this? And really try to use phone call, not be on the phone, just interactions to really enable that solving those kind of problems. The biggest one's password reset, right? We just send them a link, say, go click this link and you're good to go. So, but those are some of the things with AI and like I said, biometrics. And Simon, probably you have some other more real life experience or you're a little bit farther ahead.
Well, you mentioned that smarter companies are working with biometrics, and I figured that was probably going to be a great transition to Simon. So Simon, tell us more about how you might be thinking through the biometric puzzle as well as the artificial intelligence puzzle. Scott mentioned, kind of the chatbot features that I think are pretty prevalent, but if there's more, let us know.
Yeah. So I think, look, on the biometrics side, we're really lucky given kind of the broader Oracle sort of tech stack that we've got. And so, we're really thinking through, what does sort of, next generation authentication, whether that's to sign into a club or make a payment or just sign into your computer, like what does that look like? How do we think about, we have a public safety division, right, that is just focused on, can I use things like computer vision to understand, like who's at a facility, who should be there, who shouldn't be there, to kind of flag action from staff members. And so while I agree there are some like really creepy versions of it, I think there's some really great versions of it that are really fairly simple, whether it's, as you're walking into a private club, like, are there ways that we can kind of flag a member is on site, flag for the staff, that they're on site, and here's the important things we should know about them, whether it's it's their birthday or kind of whatever it is. I think when we step into the much broader stadium environment, there are lots of good use cases, and you can see some of them in places like airports already, right? Where like your first kind of check-in when you're authenticating into the airport, in our case, you're walking through a turnstile with a ticket. Are we flagging that you're allowed to be on site for this game, and you've got a series of entitlements that kind of go with that ticket, right? Or are we just flagging people that we don't think have tickets, and then sort of tracing them around to kind of help staff understand I'm sure many of us remember the Miami Copa game that didn't go great. And so we think there are some really good use cases for biometrics just for kind of simple site management and site security. But it can go much further, right? We have a lot of stadium customers who have, extraordinary offerings for, whether it's like alumni clubs or for corporate customers. And how do we make those hospitality experiences just very, very, very tailored to them without a lot of kind of, interactions that feel a little bit business-like as opposed to kind of hospitality-like. And so, we see in the Oracle world, the stack we're building for biometrics as being, those are great use cases because you combine kind of like knowing someone, you can handle things like payment, you can authenticate them. Certainly on the safety side, there's a lot of use cases we already have as part of some of our other industry solutions. So we see a place for it. And the technology is becoming better and better, right? So, we're working right now on simple things like in other restaurant businesses, how are we doing sentiment analysis like at the drive-through so we can really flag for staff on site where people have issues, and I think the stadiums will be beneficial. It'll benefit the stadium, whether it's simple things like counting lines and understanding how to move people around the stadium, or more complex things like understanding if I've got an issue at a retail outlet or at a food outlet kind of on stadium. So biometrics, has a place. It's coming. It's already all around you. And I think the question is like, where do you see some of those cases that you can use it? And the price point is pretty good. The question is, what do you do for the data, right? Or with the data. So like, if you're able to flag for someone that there's a problem, like, do you have a system that a staff member has that identifies for them they need to go do something about? And that often is the weak link, right? There's plenty of tools that we can put up for people to say, hey, you've got a long line at a concession because the cameras are just reading it and they're flagging it for you. But do you have a tool that on the ground can point a staff member to go and solve that? Or do you have a protocol to sort of solve that? And so there's a lot more work than just implementing the technology. There's a lot of change management there as well.
Yeah.
I think on the AI side, similar to Scott, we see lots of use cases. I'd sort of separate AI, right, into the sort of generative things that we're talking a lot about, and maybe more traditional kind of machine learning. Certainly in the machine learning stack, there's still a ton of untapped opportunities. So, as I say, this is a really complicated business. It's, you've got only a few hours. We see a lot of things like, food spoilage, retail spoilage, lots of challenges with, getting enough merch for certain events into place and making sure that it's sort of ready to go. And ultimately, the technology is really there to help operators make better predictions on, what they should be ordering, how they should be thinking about like things like dynamic pricing through an event to make sure that they're not left with spoilage. And issues which kind of tends to be the margin killer in a lot of these environments. So that's sort of the more traditional, like, hey, how do we improve our ability to calculate and think about how we should configure the business to run or how we should price items, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. On the generative side, we generally have a little bit of a mantra, which is like we don't want people starting with blank pages anymore. And that's really the beauty of a lot of these tools. So, whether it's in, Scott's great example of, I've got a wedding planning business or an event planning business, and they're building proposals for people. A lot of that work is very clerical. It's like, okay, let me find a facility, let me, create the quote and figure out what it's got to look like. Where we see people training models to come up with like, okay, I've got an interested party that has 100 people. And here's the event type, like let's pull together a sketch, and then your staff member can kind of edit and play with it. So we see lots of those opportunities. We're seeing a lot of use in even things like, promotion planning. So creating content, thinking about, how to price, how to promote, given the quality of a lot of the models and the customization people are building into the context side of these models. To build things like promotions and understand, how to edit and alter promotions given past success. And so that stuff, it's already here. There are lots of tools in the marketplace. Certainly we have a number, whether it's as simple as like, the promotion thing or creating a job spec to post somewhere, to many more like really complicated items like, having an agent that's thinking about, what a consumer wants, and then, putting a proposal in front of them for what their fan day experience could be. All of these things, in my opinion, kind of add up to we're trying to almost like replicate, the early private club experience that was highly customized, highly personal, very tailored to you in environments that haven't had that, like in a stadium, at a, general admission at a stadium. Like, how is this really about you? And you feel like it's super tailored, and the technology is certainly there, and we're seeing people use it like that in other industries and in ours.
Let's stick with AI. We have a couple of questions from the audience that came through. One of them AI related. It's from Johnny Boyd. And Johnny, you dropped it in the chat, but I was able to see it. But for audience members, if you drop your questions in the questions tab, that's the easiest way to get them noticed. This one says, is AI access provided through a downloadable app, website, QR code? Simon, you want to take that and your experience working with your customers?
Yeah. I mean, so typically it's sort of in the background, right? Like you might not even know you're interacting with it. So, you might have, let's say, a staff application or a tool that is actually, delivering to them, let's say, the generated content. It might be running in the background against, if you're thinking about computer vision, against kind of just camera feeds that you have, and you've got a trained model that is looking for, lines, sentiment, whatever it might be. So it's really in the background a lot of the time, and it's about like taking processes you have and in some ways kind of pre-filling them or accelerating them in really sort of meaningful ways. From a how we're seeing customers access, obviously QR codes are popular, but there's lots of ways to put it in front of consumers so they can get to it. And that's not just about AI. That's about, how are you putting your experiences, your digital experiences in front of consumers in really simple ways. And there's lots of good kind of tech and models that across the consumer industries people have worked on there.
Thank you for the question, Johnny. We'll get to some other audience questions. Make sure you submit them. We're going to go maybe for another 5 minutes or so. I've got another subject I want to make sure we get to, and that's data collection. How are you guys thinking through collecting data from members, from guests? And then the second part of that question is, and what are the challenges that you face? And the second part of that question is like about data visualization. How are you using that? How are you presenting data both internally and externally to help teams work faster, to address member and fan concerns, but also maybe even to help fans get what they want, see what they want? Scott, maybe I'll flip it to you first, and we'll come back to Simon.
Sure. I think, so trying to think the best way to talk about this. So because we're membership, everything is driven from a transaction. So if you buy something, that's when I know you were at the club, right? Or you check in at the golf shop, I know you're at the club. The real thing for us is to be, how can I know when you're at the club when you're not actually transacting, right? Because for us, we want engagement. So often our clubs sit in the middle of a community, and we want that community to become members, to be able to come to eat food, to work out in the fitness center, to play pickleball or tennis. We want them to get there and be active, right? And so one of the things that we always look at is engagement. And right now, the easiest way is just, did you check in? Did you make a payment? Did you do some kind of transaction? The other piece is there a way to, like I mentioned, using some of the new technology with active capture to know, like, when you connect to the guest network, we can actually see you're on property. If you show up and you're on property and just hitting golf balls, that's great. You're engaging, you're active, right? We like to see members being members and engaging in all the activities. We also look at things like, if you're a golf member and you haven't played golf in a year, that's a red flag to us, right? That means you're not engaging. Now, there's all sorts of things underneath, like you could have a surgery on a knee, or there could have been some underlying or some other thing. We don't always know the why, but what we'll do is, like, if we see at times somebody who's a frequent golfer that takes a break, maybe we have the pro reach out to them and say, hey, let's go play 9 holes. Because who gets to play with pros? I mean, the PGA professional is not that common, and it's pretty incredible to get out and watch them hit the ball and see how terrible you are compared to them. And so there are ways that we can engage people. When members show up, we have them fill out kind of a questionnaire like, what things do you like? So if you've not been to the restaurant in a while, we'll invite you to a wine tasting or a bourbon tasting or a food pairing, again, to get you back to the club, because what you see is once you go to the club again, you always leave going, I should be here more often, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we try to get that re-engagement going. So we're looking at like active capture with the guest Wi-Fi to know more about when members are on property. We have a lot of ladies that will play like bunco in the restaurant in the mornings, where they just show up and they play. They don't really buy anything, but they're just playing. But it's good to know they're there and engaging, right? So guest capture is one. The other one that's really important to us is like here in Colorado, I'll take a number of business folks out to play golf. They come, they say, this is an amazing course. I had such a great time. How do I engage with them after the fact to go, would you like to be a member? Are there membership opportunities for you, either in golf or tennis or fitness? You don't always have to be a country club golf member. That's like the top tier. You can be just fitness. You can be just social or just the restaurant. You know, there's different tiers that you can join on, so you don't just have to be everything. So that piece is really getting those guests that come who are really excited and enjoy the course to go, you know, I took a vendor out maybe 2 months ago, and he's like, I really want to become a member. I don't live too far. So you get to engage with them. So it drives not only new membership, but it also gives us a lot of that intel about folks, their interactions, what they're doing. All of that is driven. We take all the transaction Oracle data. We take all of our private events, all of our fitness, all that data, we bring it together, and we use Power BI and for visualization. We use those dashboards, and we publish every single metric or every single dimension you could look at to really, you know, try to drive, you know, what's happening at the club. We even on our internal portal, we post an entire dashboard of all the metrics that we use to drive the business. New memberships in the given month, revenue, golf rounds, tennis rounds, anything that you can do. We publish it for every employee that has access to go see and just see how's the company performing against all the various goals and things they have. So very data-driven technology, very data-driven company, you know, but at the core, like I said, all of that is just to get engagement and also to just, you know, be as frictionless as possible.
Thank you, Scott. Simon, let's wrap up here. And I want to make sure you hit on the collection of data, but also the data visualization that you can offer customers, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have a fairly strict set of rules. We tend to follow just on collection of data, because, you know, we do see a lot of frustration from customers rightly about, like, you know, many companies using their data to do other things with it, where you become the customer yourself. And so, you know, we have a fairly set hard rules, right? Where, you know, your data is your data. It doesn't intermingle. We don't use it to train models or anything like that, other than your models. And so, you know, we come at it from that perspective. What we do see is, you know, customers are very willing to hand data over to teams that they have a very close emotional bond to, or facilities that they have a close emotional bond to. So you're all in industries that in general, you know, you're going to have easier access for people to opt in and to clear kind of a lot of the regulatory hurdles. And so we see that collection as being, you know, depends on the industry, and there's obviously a lot of regulation there, but it is sort of possible to have a great data set about your customers. And as with everything, it's a question of kind of like, okay, what are you going to do with it, and how do you use it? How do you put it in the hands of staff members to kind of, you know, to act on, frankly, right? And so for us, that's really about, you know, creating large pools of data that not only have visualizations, but have kind of applications that can kind of create behavior. A lot of that logic comes from the loyalty tools world, where we're thinking about, I have a consumer and I'd like them to buy something, you know, how do I create behavior? The same thing can go with, like, I would like them to come to a game. I would like them to visit a side of the club they haven't been to in a while. And so we can put the data to certainly to work on all those kinds of things. Visualization, you know, similar, make it easy, make it, you know, something that people can kind of act on. We do see a real generational difference in terms of operators. So, you know, your younger staff will have much more facility with doing much deeper and more meaningful kind of introspection into data, and then using it for beyond visualization, but actually creating activities. So we think there's plenty of space to go. We do see a lot of teams doing more and more, not just with their operating data, but with sort of data on the field. and bringing that to consumers and thinking about how it interplays with the sort of business of being in sports. All of it's possible. I think in the U.S. there's some pretty good examples of both leagues that have become very strong in it. Like the SailGP, which is one we're really involved with, we see a lot of that telemetry data getting used and putting into fan loyalty apps as a really powerful means to connect with customers and create the sort of interactions that you want. As long as you're satisfied with the security and the privacy of it, I think there's a lot we can all do.
Let's end on that point. Simon, Scott, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to Oracle for the support of this episode of SBJ Live. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. Next week, we're back. My colleague, Ben Portnoy, our college sports reporter, will lead a discussion on NIL collectives. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone.
There you go.